I stood on the graduation stage, lights blinding, applause roaring, and 3 empty seats burning holes in the crowd. The auditorium was too bright, too loud, too alive for the hollow feeling spreading through my chest. The stage lights washed everything in white, making the rows of faces blur together, but I could still see it clearly, the gap. 3 seats in the front row, empty and unmistakable. Programs lay folded on the chairs, untouched. I knew exactly who they were meant for. My name echoed through the speakers, stretched and formal. I walked forward, heels clicking against the polished floor, posture straight, chin lifted. Applause swelled around me, a wave of celebration that should have carried me. Instead, it crashed against something solid and unmoving inside my ribs. My name is Quinn Carter. I accepted the diploma with a practiced smile, the kind you learn when disappointment has been a regular companion. The dean shook my hand. Camera flashed. Somewhere in the crowd, parents cheered, siblings waved. Families stood to capture the moment. I scanned the audience one last time, knowing what I would find and still hoping to be wronged. My phone vibrated in the pocket of my gown. For half a second, my heart leapt. Maybe they were late. Maybe they were stuck in traffic. Maybe. I didn't take it out until I stepped off stage. The message was short. Your sister's having a meltdown. We couldn't leave her. We're proud of you. No exclamation point. No congratulations. No we're sorry. Just another reminder of the unspoken rule I'd grown up with. Love in our family was conditional. It was earned by need, by volume, by whoever demanded it the loudest. And I had never been that person. I stood there while the ceremony continued, clapping when appropriate, smiling when people looked my way. Inside something cracked, not loudly, not all at once, but in a slow, devastating line that ran through every memory I had of coming second. School plays they missed. Birthdays rescheduled. Achievements minimized because my sister was struggling. Again, on the outside, I was composed, graceful. The good daughter who understood. On the inside, I was done understanding. The final applause thundered and graduates began to celebrate. I made a decision so quiet it didn't feel like one at all. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't compete for space in a family that only noticed absence when it inconvenienced them. I folded the realization into myself, neat and controlled, and walked forward alone. What I didn't know was that this quiet decision would expose secrets and leave my parents desperate for the truth. My name is Quinn Carter, and for most of my life I was known as the easy one, the strong one, the daughter who didn't need much. We lived in a quiet suburb outside Detroit, the kind of neighborhood real estate agents loved to describe as family-friendly. Neatly trimmed lawns, white fences, a 2-story house with blue shutters and a porch that looked like it belonged on a holiday card. From the outside we were perfect. 2 parents, 2 daughters. No visible cracks. Inside, everything revolved around Vanessa. She was my older sister, but older never meant steadier. Vanessa was fragile in the way that demanded constant attention. Emotional, reactive, always on the verge of falling apart. If she cried, the house stopped. If she screamed, plans changed. My parents called it sensitivity. They said she felt things more deeply than other people. They said I was lucky I wasn't like that. I was the easy one. The strong one. The child who adapted. When I was little, that label felt like praise. I learned quickly that being low maintenance earned smiles instead of sighs. So I became self-sufficient. I did my homework without reminders. Tied my own shoes. I swallowed disappointment because it seemed like the polite thing to do. The differences showed up everywhere. Vanessa's birthday parties were events. Balloons arching over the driveway, rented bounce houses, themed cakes that matched her dress. Friends filled the backyard while my parents hovered, cameras flashing, laughter loud and unrestrained. Mine were quieter. Couple of friends from school. A grocery store cake. Let's keep it simple this year, my mom would say, already tired. I learned not to ask why simple never applied to Vanessa. Tea dinner. The imbalance sat right on the table. If Vanessa didn't finish her food, no one touched it. Leave it, my dad would say. She might want it later. If I was still hungry, I waited. Asking felt selfish. School became my refuge. In classrooms, effort mattered. Achievement was visible. Teachers noticed when I worked hard, when I excelled. For the first time, I felt seen without having to compete with chaos. Report cards came home filled with praise, scholarships mentioned in the margins. My parents smiled, nodded, said, "That's nice, Quinn," before turning back to Vanessa's latest crisis. Every accomplishment felt like shouting into a soundproof room. Still, I held on to one hope. Graduation day IT was the milestone I believed would finally tip the scales. A moment too big to overlook. I imagined my parents in the front row, proud, present, forced, if nothing else, to see me. I told myself this was different. This mattered. That hope is what made the empty seats hurt so much. And it's why, as I stood there smiling for strangers, I didn't just feel abandoned. I felt foolish for believing things might change. The truth is, the cancellation didn't come out of nowhere. It arrived the way everything else in my life had, with a warning I chose to ignore. My mom called the night before graduation. Her voice already wrapped in apology before she said anything concrete. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, cap and gown hanging from the closet door, the fabric catching the light every time I moved. "Your sister's not doing well," she said. I closed my eyes. Of course she wasn't. Vanessa was always not doing well when something important belonged to me. Mom didn't say they'd try their best to come. She didn't say they'd figure something out. Instead, she said, "We might need to stay back." The word sat between us, heavy and deliberate. It wasn't uncertainty, it was preparation. "It's just one day," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. "Just a few hours." There was a pause on the line, the kind that meant she was choosing her words carefully. "You're strong, Quinn," she finally replied. "You'll understand." I always did. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation. I told myself they'd still come. That this time would be different. That Vanessa's crisis would pass like it always did. Hope, I'd learned, was a stubborn thing. Even when it had no evidence to stand on, morning came quietly. No call. No cheerful good luck text. Just silence stretching longer than it should have. I checked my phone again and again while getting dressed, while pinning my hair, while stepping into my gown. The message finally came as I was about to leave. "We can't make it. Your sister needs us." That was it. No explanation. No apology. Just a final decision delivered in a sentence so cold it made my hands shake. The ceremony. Families clustered together, waving when names were called, shouting encouragement across rows. Parents leaned into aisles with phones raised. Siblings bouncing in their seats. Each time someone's name was announced, joy rippled outward. When mine was called, I stood alone. That's when something shifted inside me. Quietly, permanently. Felt like a door closing. Not slammed. Not dramatic. Just shut, with a soft, final click. I clapped for the next graduate. A question surfaced, clear and terrifying. What if this never changes? What if every milestone came with a disclaimer? What if I spent my life understanding while everyone else simply showed up? That night, after the gown was folded and the house was still, I pulled my suitcase from the closet. I didn't pack yet. I just set it on the bed and looked at it, breathing in the weight of what it represented. If I stayed, I would keep disappearing. I didn't announce my decision. I didn't write a long message or demand an explanation. I packed the way I'd learned to do everything else in that house. Quietly, deliberately, without drawing attention. Clothes folded into neat stacks. Important papers slid into a folder. I paused only once, when I reached for a framed photo on my desk. It was old, the edges worn soft. My grandfather and me, sitting on the hood of his truck when I was 10, both of us squinting into the sun. I tucked it carefully into my bag. The drive west to Grand Rapids felt longer than it was. I kept the radio off, letting the hum of the road fill the space instead. Mile by mile, the noise in my head began to thin. No explanations to rehearse. No apologies to prepare. Just movement. Why grandfather was waiting when I pulled into his driveway, like he'd known I was coming. He didn't ask questions. He didn't look surprised. He just took my bag, set it by the door, and poured 2 cups of coffee. We sat at the kitchen table in comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't demand anything. For the first few hours my phone stayed quiet. Then a text from my mom. Are you okay? Another, where did you go? I didn't respond. I watched the messages come in, spaced out, tentative. Concern wrapped in politeness. But by the next morning the tone changed. Did you move out? We need to talk. Then came the ones that had nothing to do with me. Your dad's card got declined. Yo, you know if grandpa sent the payment this month. We're short on the mortgage. I stared at the screen, confusion slowly giving way to something sharper. That afternoon my grandfather finally spoke. He leaned back in his chair, hands folded over his stomach, eyes fixed on the window. I've been helping your parents for years, he said quietly. Bills, tuition, the house. I thought I was helping both of you. The words landed heavy. He told me how he'd stepped in when Vanessa's needs grew too expensive, too constant. How one payment became another, then another. How it was easier to send money than to ask hard questions. He believed he was keeping the family afloat, giving both grandchildren a chance. I figured you'd be okay, he admitted. You always were. Clicked then, clean and devastating. It's easier to ignore the child you think will survive, my grandfather sighed. Older in that moment than I'd ever seen him. I'm not stepping in this time, he said. They need to figure it out. Understood. This wasn't punishment. It was reality. Support that had been borrowed, not earned, was finally being called back. For the first time, I realized my leaving wasn't just an escape. It was a shift, a weight removed, a support pulled away. And somewhere between the crickets and the cooling air, I understood this wasn't just about distance anymore. It was about consequences finally catching up. The shift didn't happen all at once. It unraveled in stages, the way something unstable always does when the pressure holding it together disappears. First, the messages stayed polite, almost casual. Hey, can you call us when you have a minute? We're just trying to understand what's going on. Then they grew confused. The bank says there's no pending transfer. Did Grandpa mention changing anything? By the third day, the panic stopped hiding. We're behind on 2 payments. This is serious, Quinn. Please respond. My mom left a voicemail that afternoon. Her voice was careful, controlled, like she was choosing each word with tweezers. You're good with details, she said. You always were. Maybe you can help us figure this out. Even now, she was using me, leaning on the version of me that fixed things quietly while everyone else fell apart. And my grandfather listened as I played the message, his jaw tightening. They've known this was coming, he said. I told them I was stepping back. They just didn't think I meant it. That night, there was a knock at the door. I looked through the window and saw my dad standing on the porch, shoulders stiff, keys clenched in his hand like proof of effort. My stomach dropped, but I stepped outside anyway. The evening air was thick and still, cicadas buzzing somewhere in the trees. He didn't waste time. You could have said something, he started. Running off like this, it scared your mother. I nodded once. You missed my graduation. He sighed, already frustrated. That again. The dismissal hit harder than anger ever could. Like the moment had already been categorized, filed away as inconvenient rather than important. Your sister's been having a hard time, he said, falling back on the script I knew by heart. You know how she is. We're doing the best we can. You always say later, I replied quietly. Later we'll celebrate. Later we'll make it up to you. Later. He rubbed his temples. Families make sacrifices, Quinn. I looked at him then, really looked. The lines around his eyes. The exhaustion. The certainty that this explanation had always been enough. For who? I asked. The question hung between us, heavier than any accusation. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. His gaze dropped to the porch floor, searching for an answer that had never existed. Have you ever been called the strong one in your family? Comment below if this feels familiar. The cicadas kept buzzing. The house behind me stayed quiet. And my father stood there, unable to say the one thing that might have mattered. The question hung between us. He didn't answer. That evening, Vanessa made sure her voice was heard. I was leaving the campus library when I saw her. Vanessa stood near the entrance like she'd planned it, back straight, arms crossed, eyes already shiny. Students passed by in clusters, slowing just enough to sense tension. She'd chosen the setting carefully. An audience always made her braver. "Quinn," she said loudly, drawing attention before I could stop walking. "So this is how you do it. You just abandon your family." A few heads turned. I stopped anyway. "You left," she continued, voice trembling in a way I recognized as rehearsed. "Mom's a mess. Dad doesn't know what to do. I'm fragile, Quinn. You know that. And you just walked away." I looked at her, really looked. The same sister who had never learned to speak softly because she'd never needed to. "You skipped my graduation," I said evenly. She scoffed, waving it off like an inconvenience. "You're always fine. You don't need all that. You know that." "That's the lie you've been living off," I replied. Her expression faltered for half a second, then hardened. "Don't turn this around on me. You're being selfish. You always have been. You just hide it better." A small crowd had formed now, pretending not to listen. I could feel the weight of expectation, the familiar pull to smooth things over, to shrink. I didn't. "I'm not being selfish," I said calmly. "I'm being honest. And I'm done paying for your comfort." That did it. Her face crumpled, wounded performance snapping into place. "I can't believe you'd say that about me," she whispered loudly. "After everything I've been through." Drop a flexed biceps in the comments if you've ever had to stand up to a sibling like this. I took a breath. "If the family falls apart because one person stopped carrying it," I said, "then it was never strong to begin with." Vanessa stared at me, mouth open, searching for the next line. The tears didn't come. The outrage stalled. For the first time in my life, she didn't know what to say. For the first time, she had no script. The final confrontation came that weekend. My parents insisted on a family meeting at the Detroit house, like calling it that could restore order. The same living room where every photo frame was perfectly aligned, where the couch cushions were fluffed before guests arrived, where the illusion of balance had always been carefully maintained. This time, my grandfather came with me. Not as a rescuer, not as a shield, but as a witness. Mom started crying almost immediately. Not quiet tears, but shaking ones, the kind meant to pull everyone back into their assigned roles. "I don't understand how we got here," she said, pressing a hand to her chest. "We did the best we could." I sat across from her, hands folded, voice steady. "You didn't even apologize." The room stilled. Dad shifted, jaw tightening. "We've been over this," he snapped. "Your sister had a crisis. A tantrum," I corrected gently. "That you chose over me." He stood abruptly, slamming his hand into the couch. "You have no idea what we've sacrificed for this family." That's when my grandfather spoke. For the first time in my life, he didn't soften his words. "You're right," he said calmly. "You did sacrifice. But you also leaned me. 4 years. Their heads snapped toward him. He explained it plainly. Mortgage payments covered, emergencies handled, tuition smoothed over. Not as a brag but as a fact. "I told myself I was helping both grandchildren," he said. "But I see now I was enabling favoritism." Vanessa let out a sob, folding in on herself. Mom gasped like the floor had shifted beneath her. Dad's face drained of color. "So you're just cutting us off?" Dad demanded. "No," my grandfather replied. "I'm letting you face consequences." The room erupted. Accusations flew. Mom accused him of betrayal. Dad accused me of manipulation. Vanessa cried louder, collapsing into the familiar performance. The noise rose, frantic and desperate, like a structure finally giving way. Have you ever had to choose yourself over family expectations? You're not alone. I stood, the movement small but decisive. "I'm not negotiating anymore," I said. "Not my worth. Not my milestones. Not my presence." Mom looked up at me through tears. "You're choosing this over your family." I met her gaze. "I'm choosing myself for the first time." No one followed me to the door. No one stopped me. As I walked out, the house felt smaller, quieter, stripped of its illusion behind us, The perfect picture cracked. And this time I didn't turn around to save it. The fallout didn't explode. It eroded. There was no dramatic collapse, no single moment where everything fell apart. Instead, things wore down slowly. Messages from my parents came less often, then stopped altogether. The urgency faded into something dull and unresolved. Bills stacked up. Plans were quietly cancelled. Neighbors who used to wave started looking away, unsure which version of the story they'd been told. Without me holding the threads together, Vanessa's crises lost their power. They still happened, but there was no one rushing in to stabilize the aftermath, no invisible hand smoothing consequences. What once controlled the household became background noise, and Grand Rapids, my life took on a different rhythm. Mornings started with coffee at the small kitchen table, sunlight spilling across the floor. Evenings were spent studying, not in a rush to prove anything, but with focus that felt new. I shifted my psychology work toward understanding family systems. Not to fix mine, but to understand how patterns survive for so long when no one interrupts them. I wasn't performing strength anymore. I was living it. Sometimes the strongest boundary is silence. Agree. Let me know below. Weeks passed before my mom finally reached out again. One message. No apology. No acknowledgement of what had happened. You want to come visit? I stared at it for a long time. Then I set the phone down. Not answering wasn't punishment. It wasn't spite. It was clarity. Silence, I realized, didn't mean absence. It meant choice. My grandfather never pushed. He showed up the way he always had, quietly. Groceries left on the counter. A nod of approval when he saw me studying. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sky fade, he said, "You're breathing easier." He was right. I didn't feel triumphant. Felt steady. Unburdened. Like I'd finally set something heavy down after carrying it for too long. Silence, I'd learned, can be a boundary. The justice wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was simple. One evening, as I sipped coffee on my balcony in Grand Rapids, my grandfather called. His voice, calm and steady, carried across the line. "You did the right thing, Quinn," he said. No lectures, no justifications, just acknowledgement. And somehow that was enough. Since leaving, life had shifted in ways I hadn't imagined. I breathed easier, my chest unburdened. Laughter came more freely, unshadowed by the weight of expectation. Nights stretched uninterrupted, no anxiety clawing me awake. Simple things, a quiet morning, a long walk, a book read uninterrupted, became treasures I hadn't realized I'd been denied. I thought about the life I'd left behind. The constant balancing act, the invisible labor of keeping everyone else afloat while my own needs faded into the background. The truth was undeniable. The family's stability had been borrowed, propped up by my compliance, my patience, my absence of complaint. Without me holding it together, the imbalance couldn't stand. And the natural consequences that followed weren't vindictive. They were just reality asserting itself. Walking away wasn't heartless. It was healing. It was a reclaiming of self-respect, the kind that doesn't need permission to exist. I realized that choosing myself didn't betray anyone. It simply ended the expectation that I would disappear for the comfort of others. Silence wasn't weakness. Refusing to shrink wasn't cruelty. The bravest act was refusing to be small for people who wouldn't grow. And in the quiet that followed, I finally felt something I'd never known before. Not the flashy, cinematic kind of justice that appears in stories, but the quiet, steady, unshakable kind. The kind that comes from knowing you acted with integrity, that you preserved yourself without needing to punish anyone. For the first time, I understood that my presence wasn't optional, it was the linchpin. And for the first time, I didn't have to carry anyone else's imbalance. I was free. Whole. Alive. Walking away didn't make me heartless. It made me whole. Quinn's journey, from standing alone on the graduation stage to finally carving out a life of peace in Grand Rapids, is more than just a story about one girl's family. It's about all of us who felt unseen, unheard, or forced to shrink so others could shine. It's about realizing that being the strong one Doesn't mean you have to carry the weight of everyone else forever. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been pushed aside in your own family, know this: you're not alone. The ache of conditional love, the frustration of being invisible, and the courage it takes to finally choose yourself. These are experiences shared by many, even if they aren't often spoken aloud. Your feelings are valid. Your experiences matter. And your voice deserves to be heard. That I'd love for this to be a space where we can share and learn from each other. So, tell me in the comments. Have you ever been the strong one who was taken for granted? What would you have done in Quinn's situation? Drop a red heart if you believe in choosing yourself, and let's build a community where acknowledging our boundaries and valuing our worth is celebrated, not criticized. If you want to hear more real family drama stories, stories that explore love, tension, growth, and the consequences of hidden dynamics, hit subscribe. You won't want to miss the next video, where we'll dive into even more gripping tales about navigating family, uncovering secrets, and learning to stand tall for ourselves. Make sure to like this video and share it with anyone who might need to hear they aren't alone in their journey. Remember, every story matters. Yours does. Whether you're learning to enforce boundaries, reclaim your time and energy, or just need validation that your experiences are real, there's power in seeing yourself reflected in someone else's story. And sometimes that reflection is the first step to healing. Take a moment to breathe, honor your journey, and acknowledge the strength it's taken to get here. Self-respect isn't betrayal, and silence isn't weakness. The bravest thing you can do is stop shrinking for people who never plan to grow with you. Thank you for watching, thank you for being here, and thank you for choosing yourself, even if it feels small, quiet, or invisible to the world. You deserve your peace. You deserve your life. And this is just the beginning.